Welcome in everyone. Thanks for joining. Getting started here. Welcome to tonight's live. Won't be on here for long. I got about 40 minutes here. Hey, Schrodinger's equation, welcome. Nice to see you in here. Make sure you're tapping that like button. Smash that screen. Hi, James, how's it going? What field are you into? I'm a QCD guy. I do experimental physics on the LHCb experiment at CERN. I have a question: how do photons redshift if they don't experience time? So the redshift is about their wavelength. So all photons have wavelengths. So from our perspective, we see them redshift. So it's perfectly fine from our frame of reference to see them redshift. It's not really well defined to have a frame of reference of the photon. It breaks down in relativity. You can never go into a frame that is moving at the speed of light. So it really doesn't make sense to talk about the photon frame of reference, which is kind of a mind-bending thing. I still don't quite fully grasp it. Bogey, how's it going? What's up? Welcome in. Hit that like button. Make sure you're tapping that screen. How's it going, everyone? Is the Earth flat? No, it's not. Opinion on mathematical, finance, economics in general. I think it's a pretty interesting area. I myself am not really into the finance world, you can say, but recently I watched a video by Veritasium about the Black-Scholes equation, and that kind of got me interested in it. I will admit, but yeah, my general interest is not that high. Any advice for me trying to get into a PhD in physics? Tello, I think make sure you have some research experience that could back up your applications, as well as good letters of rec. Would it be fair to say the strong forces of curvature in the gauge fields per QCD? In some sense, yes, because at the end of the day, the gluons are sort of the connection of the curvature in the gauge field. So in some sense, yes. Love your content. Appreciate it. Lawson, I appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Thoughts on unifying possibility of M theory? I've never studied string theory in depth. I've only taken an intro course. My understanding is that M theory combines various different types of string theory together, but that's beyond my pay grade, so I'm not going to attempt to answer about M theory. How will the combination of AI and quantum computing advance human progress to the next level? Thanks for the question, James. I think AI in general has already advanced humanity in some ways because it's kind of everywhere. Like wherever you go, there's some AI being used. Thank you, Batlimos. As for quantum computing, it's hard to tell at this moment. Like I don't see where quantum computing is going. Maybe someone who works in quantum computing knows more about this. I myself think that quantum computing has some very particular applications that are not really to the general public. But that's just me. What are your thoughts on the single electron theory? I think it's a curiosity, but it's not really true at the end of the day. It's nice to see connections in physics, but you should also remember when something is just a useful model, a useful fiction. Someone said gravity doesn't exist. That's not true. Gravity exists. Here's my earbud. Boom, it dropped. Gravity proven. Where are you from? I'm from, well, that's always a tricky question. I'm from Lebanon. How about that? Advice for an undergrad getting into research. Sometimes you just gotta cold email a bunch of professors and hope that some of them would respond to you. Or in the summer, you can apply to what are known as REU programs, research experience for undergraduates, if you are a U.S. citizen or I think a green card holder. I'd have to check the specifications. But yeah, usually just cold email professors and see what happens. Desmos Demon, welcome in. Nice to see you here. Thanks for the follows. Make sure you're tapping that screen. Let's get up to 1,000 here. 293. It's an interesting number, but it's not 1,000, right? Is space so big? Why won't it fight me? Because you're just too strong. Explain a black hole to a kindergartner. Okay, so a kindergartner, let's see, how should we do this? If you stuff a lot of things in one place, then you can see that it gets bigger and bigger. But you can still see it, no matter how much stuff you can put into a single place. You'd always see that there's a big toy over there. Take this toy and ask why do you see it? And you might say, well, of course it's red or it's blue. It's a blue toy. You see the color because it has a color. Okay, great. Well, what happens if that color just got sucked into that object and no longer emitted that color? Well, then you don't see anything. It's black. Well, yeah, it's black because it doesn't really emit light anymore. So maybe black holes are things that just don't emit light for some reason. I don't know where I'm going with this. Taking statics next semester. Is it hard? Well, statics is usually just F is equal to 0. The sum of the forces is 0. So it should be easier than dynamics. In some sense, what would be the general sense? QCD confuses me a little. Well, I don't know how much QFT you've taken, quantum field theory, but typically in quantum field theory, you have a Lagrangian that you write down for the theory, and that Lagrangian has some matter fields in it, like fermion fields, and then there's some symmetry that you impose. That symmetry typically leads you to these gauge connections, which are the force carriers, either a photon or a gluon or the W and Z bosons. Why are stars big? Because there's a lot of matter out there that just clumps together and then eventually they get bigger and bigger. What's one of the biggest misconceptions that bother you? Ooh, that's a good question. I'd have to think about that. I don't know if I can figure it out on the spot. Sorry. Any tips on my AP physics class? I don't know, follow me, watch my videos. That gets you primed up. I'm not saying that's going to help you with your class, but also just, in general, YouTube videos, those are helpful. Online resources are just always there for you if you're struggling. When are we going to live on Mars? I don't know why you do that. I mean, Earth is pretty nice, right? Is anti-gravity physically possible? You can go to the amusement park and ride one of those things that rotate, and then you produce some anti-gravity just due to rotation. In that sense, yes. If you're thinking more about some substance that has anti-push, that would be dark energy. So dark energy is, in a sense, anti-gravity. So in both senses, yes. Favorite class? Probably quantum mechanics. Is it worthy to work as a physics? Maybe you mean physicist? I think every physics major thinks about becoming a physicist. The problem is finding a job. It's hard to find a job. Difference between antimatter and dark matter. So antimatter is the same thing as normal matter. So there's an antimatter version of me, theoretically. It doesn't actually exist, but there could be an antimatter version of me where everything would be the same except the charges are flipped. So an electron, instead of being negatively charged, would now become positively charged. And a proton, instead of being positively charged, would become negatively charged. So all the charge just flips. So when you go from matter to antimatter, you just change the charge. Dark matter is just something completely different. Dark matter is some substance that we don't know what it actually is. But we know that it doesn't interact with light, so we called it dark matter. But we don't know what its true nature is, so it's completely different things. Do you speak Arabic? Yes, I do. Love the last video, by the way. Finally, one quiz I did well on. That's great to hear. Good job. Does the moon rotate? Yeah, a funny thing about the moon is that it exactly rotates around itself in the same amount of time that it takes to rotate around the Earth. That's why you always see the same side of the moon. It's tidally locked in. You are only a student. Yes, exactly. I'm a student. But that doesn't mean I don't publish papers. I publish papers, well, paper so far, but two coming. What is your PhD in? So I study quantum chromodynamics. I study quarks and gluons and how quarks emit gluons and how they interact with each other. In particular, at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, we smash together protons and we create these new quarks that are heavy. They're called beauty quarks. And these beauty quarks then shower the detector with a bunch of gluons. And my job is to analyze how exactly do these beauty quarks take showers. That's one way of looking at it. Does a little hadron collider exist? Not really by name, but there's a lot of colliders that are smaller than the Large Hadron Collider. So kind of, yes. I'm doing some theory stuff in quark gluon plasma. That's awesome. I did some QGP analysis in undergrad. It's a lot of fun. Why did the Higgs mechanism not work at the beginning of the universe? So the Higgs mechanism kicks in at some temperature where the potential of the Higgs now exhibits some minimum. And then when there's some minimum, then the Higgs can now fall into a minimum. So in some sense, you have to look at the temperature of the universe as well. So the temperature matters. Make sure you're smashing that like button. Let's get up to 5K. It's a nice number. 5K is a nice number. Are there multiple dimensions of time? As far as we know, there's only one dimension of time. At what rate does gravity decrease relative to altitude? So gravity always decreases as 1 over r squared. So the force of gravity goes down as 1 over r squared. So if I double the distance, the force of gravity goes down by a factor of 4. Does the moon rotate on its axis? Yes, it does. It does. Almost everything in the solar system rotates on its axis because it's very hard for an object not to be rotating, right? As soon as some object starts to rotate in space, then it's hard to get it to stop because it has its inertia, conservation of angular momentum. What do you think of free will? I think we have free will. I believe in free will. What year in grad school are you? So I'm starting my 6th year. So almost done. One more semester. If you want to see me graduate, then tell me good luck in the comments. Could the moon landing actually happen? Yeah, we've sent so many probes by now. Thank you, Hannah. Appreciate it. Do quasi-star exist, or are they theoretical? I don't know what a quasi-star is, so I'd have to look it up. I'm not an astrophysicist. I'm sorry. Can you explain dark matter? Sure. So dark matter appears to be some extra matter in galaxies because every time we look at galaxies and we see how they rotate, we find that they're rotating faster than what we'd expect if there's this much matter that we see with our own eyes. So if I see this much matter exists and the galaxy is rotating faster than it should, maybe there's actually more matter there that I just don't see with my eyes. So if I don't see it with my eyes, then it probably doesn't interact with light. And if it doesn't interact with light, then maybe it's dark. So maybe there's some dark matter out there. So when we make our measurements, we find that there is some kind of matter out there, but we don't know its nature, but it doesn't interact with light, so it's dark. So we call it dark matter. What are you going to do after your PhD? Not too sure yet. I'm kind of go both ways, either industry or academia route, but haven't really figured it out completely yet. What does physics think of God? Physics by itself has a limitation in that it only studies the universe, right? It studies the natural universe. Physics was not or cannot by its own tools answer things that are metaphysical. If you want to go into metaphysics, you have to start doing philosophy. Do you believe in an afterlife? Yes. Do you think we'll eventually figure out fusion energy sources? Yes, I do. I'm a math and CS minor, almost done with my BS. I want to pursue a PhD in quantum physics. Advice? If you want to pursue a PhD in quantum mechanics, then you should probably take a course on quantum mechanics and see if you actually like it or not. If you haven't taken the proper background for quantum mechanics, then you probably will be way behind when you do that PhD. Also remember that a PhD in quantum physics is not clear what it is. You have to look up what you mean by the quantum PhD because there's different routes. You can do condensed matter physics, you can do quantum field theory and particle physics. There's no like quantum physics PhD. That's not really a thing. Any thoughts on what's going on with the 3 polarizer paradox? Yeah, so this is I teach this in my Electromagnetism, and so in my E&M course, I teach how polarizers work and how you can have the electric field. So let's say the electric field is vertical, and you put a polarizer that is also vertical, then the electric field just goes straight through because the polarization is vertical and the electric field oscillation is vertical. So that's how a polarizer works. It lets electric fields go that have the right polarization. But what happens if I start rotating the polarizer and the electric field is vertical? Well, if I have the polarizer at an angle, then only part of the electric field now will be transmitted because you can break it up into components and you can find that there's some component that's at an angle. So what happens is if I have 3 polarizers, effectively what you're doing is you're taking the electric field and you're rotating it until it becomes from vertical, 45, then horizontal. If you don't do this extra rotation step in the middle, then you're going vertical, horizontal. That doesn't work. That's why you lose the electric field. Why can't we achieve light speed travel? Because you have to be massless. If you're not massless, then you're always traveling at less than the speed of light. If you had to say string theory correct, honestly, I kind of like string theory, but it's hard to say at the moment. There's too many things that need to be shown for it to be taken as now a theory, something that we actually do calculations with. So I'd probably give it a 65% chance of being right. Can you have a single pole magnet? So we haven't found them, and as far as we can tell, they don't exist, which means all magnets at the end of the day are dipole magnets, so they both have a north and a south. Now, if you were to discover a single pole magnet called a monopole, you'd probably be winning a Nobel Prize, and you'd probably be revolutionizing physics as we know it, so that'd be really interesting. What's your favorite boson? Probably the gluon, because that's what I study. Quantum theory opinion. We don't understand the measurement problem. That's my opinion. So gluons, Gluons, these are the force carriers in the strong nuclear force. Is it true that there's only one electron? Not really, no. Physicists don't take that seriously anymore, but it is a useful fiction. How does refraction of light explain Einstein's theory? I'm not sure if refraction by itself has to do directly with Einstein's theory of relativity. Refraction has to do with the wave theory of light. So are we saying that it's impossible to have a truly linearly polarized source? No, you can have linear polarization, but as long as you rotate that polarization with a polarizer in an intermediate step, then you can have the final polarization come out. How can I become better at physics? I'm really good at math, but doesn't know anything about physics. You have to start from the basics. Start from physics 1, try to really understand what do we do in physics. We try to predict things. We try to write down laws of motion. We try to have a scenario, and we try to ask what happens next. We always are trying to solve these equations to figure out what happens next. So start from the bottom, start from 0, motion, 1 dimension, 3 dimensions, forces, Newton's laws, all that. Build your foundation. Once you build that foundation, everything else starts to fall into place. What gives an object mass? So typically it's the Higgs field gives fundamental particles mass, but as for bigger objects, macroscopic objects like us, most of our mass is coming from potential energy. That potential energy is inside of protons in terms of the gluon interactions with the quarks. So most of our mass is actually coming from interactions of particles, and that interaction that has energy can be converted into mass via E is equal to mc squared. So if I have a lot of potential energy stored inside of protons, then that can be thought of as mass, and that's where most of our mass comes from. Thoughts on the standard model particle physics in Lagrangian form? So a lot of people look at the big Lagrangian, I made a few videos about it. It's like this big, and it's weird, and there's a lot of symbols and stuff like that. And sure, like it looks kind of wonky, but if you actually write it down with the symmetries, with the notation, then a lot of the fields can be grouped together. A lot of things can be put nicely into matrices. It's not that complicated. Like people make it out to be so much more complicated than it is just because you can write something this long. But at the end of the day, you can compactly write it in a way that still conveys kind of the same amount of information. So I think at the end of the day, the standard model to some degree is elegant, because if I tell you SU3 cross SU2 cross U1, you can write down that Lagrangian. What's the terminal velocity of a human? No idea, I'd have to do the calculation. Do you regret getting into physics? Was there another field you considered? I don't really regret it. I think physics is one of the best things that I've ever studied, and I think I'm the person that I am because I studied physics. If I had studied something else, then I don't know if I'd be the same person. You know what I'm saying? By the way, if you're enjoying this live, make sure to hit that follow button and make sure to tap that screen. Let's get up to 10K. I'm only going to be here for about 20 more minutes, so we'll see. Difference between instantaneous velocity to velocity. So an instantaneous velocity is the answer to the question, how fast are you moving right now? Whereas the average velocity is kind of like asking, well, how fast were you going when you went from your house to the school? Well, you weren't going in one speed. You were first going slowly, maybe then you accelerated, maybe then you stopped at a stop sign. But on average, how fast were you going? So then you take the distance divided by the time. You get an average. But if I ask you how fast are you going right now, that's instantaneous velocity. Do you have to write a dissertation for your PhD? If yes, how long is it? The answer is yes, of course. Every PhD has a dissertation, which you have to defend. I'm currently in the process of kind of writing it up. I'm writing a paper, so it's kind of different, but eventually that paper goes into the dissertation. I expect it to be about 150 to 200 pages. You never really know. Depends on how many figures you put in. But yeah, a lot of the time, the reason they're big is because there's a lot of figures in there. And plots take up a lot of space. Is the CKM matrix unitary? Ooh, good question. Are we trying to measure that? It's been a moment since I've done calculations with CKM. But it should preserve. Yeah, I'd have to go back and check. Do you believe in God? Yes, I do. Do quarks exist, and what are they? So quarks are small particles. They're like fundamental. They're not made up of anything as far as we can tell. And these quarks, when you put together 3 of them, you can form a proton. When you put together very similar kinds of these quarks, 3 of them, you make a neutron. And if you put 2 quarks together, you get something known as a meson. And so these quarks are ultimately what make up protons and neutrons. And they interact via a new kind of force called the strong nuclear force. Yeah, that's what I thought, Black Tiger. I thought we were still measuring whether it is unitary or not. That's why I was hesitating. Can you be a data scientist? Yeah, if you do physics, then a lot of the people that I know transition into data science, machine learning, or software engineering, stuff like that. Did you do a master's before starting your PhD? No, in the US, you don't need a master's. You just go straight from undergrad to PhD, and that's what I did. What if the Earth started turning in the other direction? Well, considering that the Earth is rotating and has some rotational speed this way, if you just immediately stop and start turning the other way, then the acceleration that you would feel is huge, and that would just wreak havoc on the surface of the Earth. Why are the units for gravity meters per second squared? What does the second squared mean? Yeah, so if you put it that way, it's not really clear what the unit is saying, meters per second squared. But here's a suggestion. Write it as meters per second. So take meters per second as 1 unit, and then divide that by second. So I have meters per second. And now it's actually clear what it's saying. It's saying that for every 1 second of acceleration, my velocity, meters per second, increases by this amount. So that way it makes more sense. What do you do for work? I do research and I teach. Eric Ritten or Eric Weinstein? I think you mean Ed Witten, in which case Ed Witten for sure, because he's an actual physicist who is still doing physics. No shade for Eric Weinstein. I think he's a brilliant communicator, that's for sure. I think I need to read more about the 3 polarizer thing. Any good sources you can recommend? I think 3 Blue 1 Brown made a video on that, so you can definitely check it out. What seasonings do high energy physicists put on neutrinos to make the flavor oscillate? Great question. Personally, I like cumin and onion powder, but different physicists have different ideas. Theory on why math majors hate physics: because they're too rigorous. Math majors, I'm all about the rigor. I have to prove things. I can't just assume that you can have a smooth function. I have to prove it. Get out of here. Do you believe in God? Yes, I do. Which theory of gravity makes the most sense to you? Currently the best theory is Einstein's theory of gravity, so that's like the theory. Who's your favorite physicist? Probably Isaac Newton. He's like the GOAT. Are you a believer in axions? At some point in life, I considered them. Not sure how I feel about them right now. Do you believe we will be able to exceed the speed of light? I don't think so. Oh, sorry, you meant 1.12% the speed of light. I thought you were saying like 112%. Maybe, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Any scientific backing for quantum manifestation? Not really, no. That's some voodoo. Are you religious? Yes, I am. Have you been to Fermilab? No, but I'd love to visit. I've been to BNL, Brookhaven. Why C the term for speed of light? I actually don't know who was the first person to write C for speed of light. That's a good question. Are you a professor? Not yet. I'm hoping to be one day. Best metaphor for explaining infinity. I don't know if I have like a good metaphor, but imagine that you're walking down a road and you keep walking and you keep walking and the road just keeps going and you keep walking and you keep walking and there's more road and you keep walking and there's more road. There's no end, right? That's infinity. Or imagine you are counting and there's like a line. So every time a ball passes, you pick it up and you count it. And then you just keep counting forever. So that's an infinity. Infinity is just a foreign concept that you have to start making weird scenarios about it. All right. Why did you study physics? It's because I love learning things about the world. I think the universe is absolutely beautiful and has some mysteries that need uncovering. It also is related to philosophy, which I'm also interested in. So having studied physics, that gives me sort of enough base where I can branch out to different things, which is pretty nice. Did you meet Quantonaut at BNL? Actually, yes, kind of. We met at Stony Brook. So there was a summer school, and we both went to a summer school, which was at Stony Brook. So that's how we met. So close to BNL. You do not have a PhD. You're absolutely right, because I'm a PhD student, and that's what the word student means. Favorite physicist, Isaac Newton. What does supersymmetry explain? Supersymmetry, I'll tell you what it is first of all. It's that take all the matter particles and all the force particles and exchange them to do a swap. Then you end up with like twice the amount of particles. So now there's a new symmetries that I can replace all the matter particles like electrons and quarks with the force particles like gluons and photons. I can do the switch. And the reason physicists came up with this is because there's a really tricky problem in particle physics, which is that the mass of the Higgs boson should be way higher than it is. It should be like really, really large. But the fact is the mass of the Higgs is not really, really large. The mass of the Higgs is 125 GeV. We actually measured it at CERN. So why is the mass of the Higgs so low when the theory predicts it to be really, really high? Supersymmetry comes in and says, I know why it's low. It's because the reason it should be high in the first place is because you missed half of these particles over here. If you include these particles over here, then the mass actually comes all the way down. So hopefully that explains the reason behind supersymmetry. By the way, please don't spam the chat. If you have a question, then, just, I don't know, write it maybe a few times, but I know there's like a lot of questions here. Also, just 5 more minutes and I'd have to end, unfortunately. Make sure you are following if you haven't yet, and tap the screen just so we can hit 10K for today. What was your SAT score? I never took the SAT. Can you explain superposition? Sure. So superposition is a way in quantum mechanics to write down that this thing is possible and that thing is possible. So if I want to write down all the possibilities or all the outcomes of a measurement, then I would say they're in a superposition. Higgs boson 125 is low because you need to apply it to a black hole with gravity, my guy. I don't know if that's sarcastic. Selectrons, quarks, gluinos, photinos. Yeah, we got the resident supersymmetry expert here. Jorge is in the house. Make sure you're following Jorge. Advice to students wanting to study physics, make sure to master the basics. Physics 1 and Physics 2 might seem like they're too trivial or, like they're not going to show up again. They show up everywhere. So when you take Physics 1, when you take Physics 2, mechanics, electrodynamics, you have to be mastering those topics when you take them. Master the fundamentals. Which movie is the closest true about physics? I hear a lot about Interstellar. I haven't seen it myself, but they say it's pretty good. Thoughts on PhD students going into quant? So I think that means like a quantitative researcher or analyst. I've seen it happen. It happens. I think they make a lot of money, so that's probably why they go there. Are you scared of the truth? I don't think so. Will the world be around in 500 years? Probably. Probably. Are there naturally occurring wormholes? As far as we can tell, no. And it's kind of tricky to see if wormholes are actually a thing or they're just a fiction. Are you good at math? I would say so, yeah. I'm pretty good at math. Ahla alam, ahla sahla. Chess? Yeah, if you want to play me at some point, just send a DM and we can play some chess on LeeChess or chess.com. I have both accounts. Thank you for everyone who followed. Thank you for everyone who's tapping that screen. Make sure you continue to tap that screen. So is there a creator? I think so, yeah. Can you explain how traveling at high speeds, the slower time moves? So I was actually thinking about that today. I was thinking, is there a good analogy to why time should slow down if you start moving? And something that I thought of was, if I put a clock in the freezer, then the clock would tick slower. Believe it or not, things slow down in the freezer. So in some sense, temperature can slow down time. Now the difference between relativity and your freezer is that your freezer slows down time at some macroscopic level, right? At a level where, things don't rot, life freezes, but relativity slows down time no matter the temperature. As long as things are moving, then clocks will tick slower. So if you can imagine a clock ticking slower when you freeze it, then you can imagine that clocks can actually tick slower when they move. And that's basically the idea behind relativity, is that moving things would have their clocks tick slower. Now, ultimately, the reason for this is because the universe is not what we call the Euclidean universe. That is, it's not that time and space are of the same essence. Instead, time is treated differently, and space and time form what's known as a Minkowski geometry, which is to say that space and time are in such a way as to keep the speed of light constant. So if you demand that the speed of light has to be constant, then you find that you should get time slows down and space, time slows down and space shrinks. Do you find being multilingual or learning a language is useful to physics research or studies? So I speak Arabic and English, and I've never used Arabic in physics, so I don't know. Maybe it helps me mentally to think better or something. I don't know. But also, I used to be a chess player, so I had a lot of background in problem solving. So chess has contributed a lot to my thought. Plasma or particle physics, I'm a particle physicist, so that's what I do. Is it possible to do physics PhD with a chemistry bachelor's and molecular modeling master's? Well, it depends on what kind of PhD you want to do in physics. If it's closely related to what you're doing, then yeah, why not? If it's kind of foreign or far off, then maybe it's hard. It's hard. What's your chess ELO? On chess.com, it's about 2,200 something, and on LeeChess, it's 2,400, something like that. Invariance of speed of light is so counterintuitive, but it's true. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you got to take those leaps in physics that just change the paradigm. I saw Planck length limits photon wave spread to 20 micrometers using ChatGPT. Anytime someone says, I solved something using ChatGPT, it means they didn't do anything. They just ripped something off of online. How much do you make? I'm a grad student, so I don't make too much. You could probably look up how much grad students make in universities. Talk about the Doppler effect. Sure, so waves have a wavelength to them, which is basically telling you how long it takes for a wave to complete one full oscillation. So if I have a wave and that wave is going up and down, that wavelength can actually expand or contract. And another way to say it is the frequency. So how many times does it complete a full oscillation in a second, for example? Then the Doppler effect is basically the increase or decrease of that frequency. So a common example is that if a siren is moving next to you, then if it's moving towards you, you would hear the pitch higher. But if it's moving away from you, you would hear the pitch lower. Thoughts on scientism? As far as I understand it, scientism is the belief that only things that can be verified through science have to be believed. In which case, it's kind of self-defeating, isn't it? Mans is a particle physicist, 2K, and argued with Plato, what can't he do? Yeah, I actually won that argument. So if you're not familiar, I argued with Plato when I went to Greece, and I won that argument. So because he couldn't speak back. All right, thank you all for joining us today. If you enjoy this live and you'd like to ask more questions, feel free to DM me. Feel free to follow, hit that follow button. Check the link tree that I have in my profile. Check my Instagram. I have a lot of links, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. And whenever I have time, I try to do these lives. So I appreciate all of your great questions, your curiosity. I love when I just see a barrage of questions in the comments. So thanks again. Make sure to hit that follow button. I'll see you all next time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Maybe next time Jorge and I will go live together. Thanks for joining, Jorge. Have a good one, everyone. See you. How do I end this?